Hello. This is a brief overview, a bizarre summary, if you will, of facilitated communication, what it is, why it's pseudoscience, and why, despite being perennially discredited through scientific testing, it prevails as an idea.
And it was just so clear and so unmistakable. I was sitting there watching this and saying, my God, it's really true. This stuff is bogus.
Facilitated communication aims to give nonverbal people who struggle to otherwise communicate, usually people who are severely cognitively impaired, a means to do so. The idea is that a facilitator holds the arm of the person unable to verbally communicate and aids them in pointing at or pressing letters on a board, a keypad, or something similar. One of the most widely employed variations of facilitated communication is the rapid prompting method, which doesn't have a facilitator physically hold the communicator's arm, but rather holding and moving a letterboard or similar apparatus and using prompts to influence response. To be clear, some nonverbal people, some people with autism, who cannot effectively communicate in early life, do go on to become effective communicators and show that they are at least as intelligent as anyone else. That is not in doubt. Dr. Howard Shane is a speech pathologist and director of the Autism Language Program at Boston Children's Hospital, and has said that most of the nonverbal children he works with are ultimately able to achieve independent typing through his program. But, he says, if someone's going to be a typist, if they are going to develop the motor skills to communicate via typing, they don't need somebody to facilitate them.
We have this saying in our center that no person is too physically disabled to be able to communicate. The slightest movement, winking of an eye, moving of an eyebrow, sipping and puffing on a switch, on a straw would control a switch. Finding that subtle movement is all you need to be able to control the technology.
Observations and theories akin to facilitated communication were considered and debated as early as the 60s, but usually it's Rosemary Crossley who is credited as independently inventing it in 1977 in Australia, where it became popular. Often, proponents of facilitated communication, or FC, argue that the people they're aiming to help aren't cognitively impaired, but simply just unable to speak and lack the motor control to write independently. This was the case with Crossley, who worked for the Mental Health Authority in Carlton, Victoria. When Crossley supported the arms or hands of her patients to help them point to pictures, letters, and other stimuli, Crossley became convinced that several of the children revealed literacy and reasoning skills that they had somehow developed with little or no instruction. She believed that not only were some of them not cognitively impaired at all, they had also independently learned things like grammar, how to read and write, or how to multiply numbers. Crossley started using facilitated communication with one of her patients, Anne MacDonald, in 1977, and in 1979, when MacDonald turned 18, she, through facilitated communication, commenced legal action to win the right to leave the hospital where she had lived since she was 3. She went to live with Crossley and co-authored a book the following year, and she and Crossley became widely celebrated. In 1986, Crossley launched the government-funded DEAL Centre, Dignity Through Education and Language, to promote alternative communication approaches, principally facilitated communication. By the early 90s, it had started to become popular in the US, in no small part because of Douglas Bicklin, a special education professor from Syracuse University. Like Crossley, he reported that facilitated communication revealed many people that had been deemed cognitively impaired were just trapped in their bodies, but were just as intellectually able as anyone else, if not more so. But from the start, there were skeptics. You're not really facilitating communication, you're subconsciously doing it for them. You're getting them to type out what's in your own head, or what you think they would say, or what you want them to say. Yes, that is what this is. A government-sponsored test in Australia in 1989 showed that, in conditions where the facilitator's potential influence was controlled, i.e., they didn't see the message or picture that the communicator was asked to repeat or name, it didn't work. In 1993, the PBS documentary Prisoners of Silence was aired. It devastates the facilitated communication claims.
Thanks to computers, thousands of nonverbal people can express themselves independently. With such equipment available, Shane questioned, why should autistic people need another person to hold their hands? And why should disabled individuals who can point by themselves need someone to hold their hands to type? They tested 12 clients, facilitating with 9 staff members, many who were trained in Syracuse. They ran dozens of trials.
We literally really didn't get one correct response.
It's very easy to fail in one's attempt to demonstrate something. It's usually more difficult to be successful. So it almost doesn't matter how many instances of failed studies we have. What we need with any one individual are instances where the person succeeded.
The scientific evidence suggested that far from unlocking the minds of autistic individuals, FC tapped the unconscious thoughts of the facilitator. Rosemary Crossley, the founder of FC, is facilitating with a head injury victim in a coma to make a very important decision about where he will live. By drawing a line on the screen, it is easy to see that Rosemary Crossley is ever so slowly moving the board.
Yes, this is a clip of Rosemary Crossley communicating with a man in a coma. But she's not really communicating with him. He's in a coma. Some of the effects of facilitated communication's baseless claims have been devastating. There have been dozens of cases, perhaps hundreds, 60 just by 1995, of abuse accusations made by non-verbal people through facilitated communication. Prisoners of Silence relays the story of one, Jerry Girardi, whose non-verbal autistic son seemingly accused him of sexual assault through facilitated communication. Girardi had to leave his home as he was considered a danger to his child for 6 months, but the case was dropped when court-ordered double-blind tests showed that his son couldn't write and did not author the accusations. They came from the mind of the facilitator. So what? Is this all a massive hoax, perpetrated by thousands of separate and otherwise unconnected individuals across the globe? No. It is the ideomotor effect, unconscious movement by the facilitator, exactly how a Ouija board works. In the case of facilitated communication, it ends up spelling out what the facilitator subconsciously thinks the person they're trying to help might want to say, or subconsciously spells out their own unconscious thoughts or fears. The facilitator in the Girardi case did not act maliciously, but unconsciously. But it should never have happened. The signs that it's not real were always there. Communicators not looking at the board they're hitting, but facilitators doing so intently. Communicators suddenly having sophisticated writing ability and knowledge, and this is the real clue, communicators only being able to use facilitated communication with a few or only one other person, a believer, sometimes their mum but not their dad, sometimes a teacher but not their parents. In 2018, a meta-analysis of 18 studies into facilitated communication was published by members of the University of Sydney, concluding again that FC is unscientific and that there is no evidence FC is a valid form of communication for individuals with severe communication disabilities. Studies that purportedly show favourable results for FC are either methodologically unsound or really do no such thing. For example, a 1996 study was conducted by researchers Donald Cardinal, Darlene Hansen, and John Wakeham. The study consisted of 43 FC users being shown a randomly selected word from a list of 100 words, while their facilitator was kept out of the room. The facilitators were shown the list of 100 possible words before entering the room. In all, 3,800 trials were conducted across the 43 students, with each being tested 90 times. Of those 3,800 trials, the correct answer was typed 9.6% of the time, which FC advocates see as evidence that the practice works. But in the same study, a correctly spelled word was typed more often, slightly more than 11% of the time. That tells you that the facilitators are guessing, said Jim Todd, a psychology professor at Eastern Michigan University. In a 2000 study, Facilitated Communication for Persons with Severe Communication Problems, 6 out of 7 student subjects were able to correctly solve multiple choice tasks through FC, according to the ICI website. But the same person who came up with the test materials also served as the facilitator, completely undermining the test's veracity. Much is obscured by proponents who point to anecdotal evidence. Often the anecdotal evidence is like this. So-and-so started with FC, and now they communicate all by themselves. Well, some people who are nonverbal do go on to be effective communicators, but it's not because of FC, and the science has shown that. As Dr. Shane says, it's part of natural progression, and if it was FC, simple double-blind testing wouldn't so obviously and irrefutably prove that it is the facilitator communicating.
He showed both a series of pictures and asked them to type what they saw. When both Betsy and her facilitators saw a picture of a key, the letters K-E-Y were typed. But Shane wanted to discover what happened if each saw a different picture. When Betsy saw a cup, she didn't type cup, she typed hat, what the facilitator saw.
Okay.
When Betsy was shown a picture of a dog, she didn't type dog, but sneakers.
Both Crossley, who is now dead, and Bicklin, who is now retired, resisted scientific testing of the facilitated communication techniques that they championed, and argued that communicators didn't test well under pressure or refused testing out of protest at having their ability questioned. But if they had, they would have saved many people from being accused of terrible things that they didn't do, and would have saved thousands of parents from the heartache of having their hopes that FC built up crushed. Facilitated communication has been disproven through numerous clinical tests, and to be clear, most facilitators are probably not trying to deceive. In the PBS documentary, it's very clear they're caring people who were themselves deceived by the likes of Bicklin and Crossley, who both had vested interests in maintaining the charade of a disproven technique that had given them both fame and prestige. Prisoners of Silence humiliates Bicklin. It intellectually shatters him. But why, after this, and after the American Psychological Association passed a resolution declaring that facilitated communication is a controversial and unproved communicative procedure with no scientifically demonstrated support for its efficacy in 1994, and why after so much more scientific study and literature does it prevail?
And Stacy types out, "I love you, Mom."
And people would use phrases like, FC is my whole life, FC is my life. These people were dedicated. They spent their own money doing training. They spent their own money to buy Canon communicators.
The power of belief, of wanting your child not to be very cognitively limited, but intelligent, even gifted, is surely the driving factor of why parents accepted facilitated communication, and surely why they were willing to overlook all the signs it didn't really work. I can't blame any parent for wanting that and for clinging to hope. I can't blame people who have dedicated their lives to helping children who cannot communicate for wanting to do just that. But when it comes to the purveyors of this repeatedly disproven pseudoscience, I think it might be more complicated. In 2012, Australian newspaper the Herald published a 3-part article, which has since been removed from their website, which questioned facilitated communication and quoted the woman with cerebral palsy who had gone to live with Crossley at 18, Anne MacDonald's mother. She was quoted as saying that she had long doubted her daughter's words were her own. I think the responses are more telling than the article. People deeply wounded and angered by the questioning of Crossley and FC. Even Bicklin attacked the article by conflating doubt of FC's efficacy with doubts about the abilities of people with autism or cerebral palsy. Question FC, you must be anti-disabled. In 2015, then philosophy professor Anna Stubblefield was found guilty of sexually assaulting a man, DJ, with severe mental impairment that she had been using FC with for years. Only she was able to communicate with him through FC. The story is covered in the excellent film Tell Them You Love Me from 2023. In that documentary, she maintains that her victim was fully cognitively able and consenting, but when tested by Dr. Shane, DJ was found to be mentally incompetent and unable to give consent. He was found to have the mental capacity of a toddler.
His way of telling you that he wanted something to eat was he would scoot over to the refrigerator and tap on the refrigerator. That's very functional. But to move from that to pointing to a picture of the refrigerator, that's a greater level of abstraction. And in all the years he had been in these different programs, he had never moved from the physical to that type of communication.
In Tell Them You Love Me, I would argue that Stubblefield comes across as not motivated only by caring or hoping. She describes DJ's writing as incredibly insightful, but really, this writing was her writing, and she's complimenting herself. She took DJ to conferences, gained notoriety, and vindicated or self-reinforced writing articles such as Sound and Fury, when opposition to facilitated communication functions as hate speech. Like Bicklin, she's in too deep to back out now. If FC isn't real, she raped him. If FC isn't real, his academic status and life's work and hers are shams. If FC isn't real, the practitioners have not only been wasting their time, they've been using disabled people as puppets. A popular and recent podcast called The Telepathy Tapes, which rehashes much of FC, but with the idea telepathy is at play, is much the same. Hopeful, wishful parents. A narrator led by a desire for recognition and validation. A doctor temporarily struck off for malpractice, motivated by vindication. Writing in 1994, Dr. Gina Green noted that FC led some to conclude that individuals with autism must have telepathy, and so something like the telepathy tapes is, despite its claims, nothing new at all.
In the telepathy tapes, it's similar reasons. It's parents who long to have connection with their children, right? Yeah. And who struggled with lots of different methods for many years, and they didn't work. Kai Dickens in the telepathy tapes, when a number of journalists who have now questioned it, she has said it's ableist, to question it. It's just a way to silence the critique and the debate around it.
Often proponents will attack critics, accusing them of being ableist or undermining their worth. But I think that you could argue that FC proponents are the ones undermining the worth and value of the people they claim to help by wanting them to be something other than who they are. All of the research that's been done that supports FC, it's completely flawed, Dr. Shane said in 2016. It was debunked in the 90s, it was debunked in the 2000s, it will be debunked in the 2030s. It will prevail on the fringe because it appeals to hope. The power of hope and belief seems so often to supersede all else. Again, I'm not trying to discount people with cognitive impairment or disabilities by saying that they cannot progress. Some of them certainly can, but not through FC. And I'm also certainly not trying to say that everyone who is nonverbal has cognitive impairment or disabilities. But what I am saying is that FC does them a disservice, and in many cases it can be dangerous. If you believe in FC, feel free to tell me how and why I'm wrong, but do me a favor, just think, if it wasn't real, just hypothetically, what would that mean to you? And would that feeling prevent you from accepting that it wasn't real? Yeah, or don't, whatever you like. Thanks for joining me. You can follow me on Blue Sky for absolutely zero insights. You can support me on Patreon, all of that. Thanks very much. See you next time. Good night.